let's talk about this. So Sony has been at this for a while, basically censoring games with allegedly inappropriate content, which is, from what I can see, at the very most, mildly erotic fan service, apparently to safeguard the sound development of children. Despite the fact that all of these games already receive ratings from CERO, from ESRB, from PEGI, and despite the fact that they do nothing of the sort for all the extremely violent games that come out on the PlayStation platforms. And despite the fact that it really irritatingly inhibits the game developers as well as the fans who are operating in this particular space and want to enjoy their content, which has already received a rating suggesting what age group it should be available to, and here they are now unable to enjoy their content in its fullest form on the PlayStation platforms. So today we're going to talk about how this monkey business emerged, about some of the PS4 games that have been unnecessarily crippled or banned as a result of this way of thinking, and also the impacts that have stemmed from this, as well as Nintendo's response to this, which can only be described as a slam dunk on Sony in the eyes of anyone who really appreciates freedom of expression. And just as a note, I will be showing some comparison shots that show the censored PS4 versions of games versus the PC and Switch versions of games, which are not censored. And while there's no nudity or anything like that, which makes this whole situation kind of ridiculous, but if you're allergic to seeing a little bit of underwear, bikinis, or even underboobs, you might want to not watch this video, but just listen to it. It is a very interesting subject after all. But anyways, let's jump in. So with Sony, essentially within the past couple of years, any game that you might consider to involve some sort of fan service is getting shoved through a sort of content certification process that either results in the game being approved, the game having certain parts of it censored, or the game, in a few cases, being altogether banned. According to Japanese developers who have to comply with the system, they have to fill it out in English, which of course inflates their development costs if they need to hire a translator to fill out these forms, and if they ultimately need to rework parts of the game to comply with Sony's standards. Which is apparently quite ambiguous and carried out on a case-by-case basis. The fact that this is supposed to be conducted in English perhaps suggests that it is the gross baby of Sony of America, which is not altogether surprising considering the sort of climate in America these days. It is interesting that they're not just cracking down on Japanese games that are released overseas, but also on Japanese games released domestically. Japan has historically been fairly lax about this kind of stuff. You know, I think that artificially shoehorning what various developers want to make and what various fans want into this sort of mold that you've created from whatever social pressures exist at the time is maybe not a good thing. And seriously, what happened to leaving this to CERO, which is the Japanese equivalent of ESRB? They already give ratings to games which very clearly inform parents as to what games are appropriate for their children, and inform retailers, you know, if you should be selling this to someone who looks like they're 12 or if you should be asking for some identification. And apparently this is the issue at stake here, protecting the children. Anyways, this censorship from Sony has been going on for a while now, but the very first time it was publicly acknowledged by Sony, as far as I know, was by Atsushi Morita in a conference in December where he was interacting with fans, and he said the following: "Regarding the regulation of expression, we were just matching global standards. Balancing freedom of expression and the safety of children is a difficult problem." I think it's a bit of a stretch to suggest that there is a global standard here, but certainly with the rise of Let's Plays, of Twitch streams, and so on, Japanese games that were previously fairly obscure are getting a lot more attention worldwide, which could be putting a little pressure on Sony to rope these games in if they think that these games are putting the Sony brand in a negative light, I guess. Mostly these are really niche games that they're targeting. Like, I mean, even if these games had reason to be considered kind of controversial or a little too erotic, it's like, I don't know, a piece of shaved carrot falling onto the surface of a lake and causing a small ripple. It probably doesn't really matter at all. Anyways, in a more recent interview with the Wall Street Journal, a spokesperson for Sony of America said, Sony has established its own guidelines so that creators can offer well-balanced content on the platform, and so the gaming does not inhibit the sound growth and development of young people. According to the Wall Street Journal, she declined to say when these guidelines were introduced or to discuss them in detail. This kind of fairly mild fan service makes you concerned about the sound growth and development of children? Okay. So thighs are bad, belly buttons are bad, but like spines getting ripped out of people's anuses? Apparently that is totally okay. No problem. Statements like this that are so thinly veiled from companies like Sony are, quite frankly, a little bit embarrassing. You probably don't care too much about what the children think about this because you also allow violent games which have the same ratings to exist on your system without censorship. So what's the deal here? You are just targeting these specific video games that have really mildly erotic kind of fan service type content, and the kids are already protected by rating systems and hopefully their parents' good parenting. So what are you doing, really? And let's not forget that this goofiness on the gaming front is mainly disrupting not kids, but adults who meet the requirements of the CERO, the ESRB, the PEGI ratings, and they just want to enjoy their content, which they can't now because it is gimped or banned by Sony because they are caving into the social pressures of the current day. And let me just say that keeping content away from kids that may disrupt their sound development is the job of parents, not large companies who already have their content age classified by ratings organizations such as the ESRB or PEGI or CERO or whatever. It's so clear that you are just worried about potential social or legal backlash in the current environment, and so you are blocking this content without any real regard for the fan base that enjoys these types of games and who have placed trust in you for years and years. Anyways, this is Sony's position on the matter, but before jumping into Nintendo's big dunk on Sony, let's take a look at some actual examples of the software that they've been messing up. So this has impacted a ton of games, mostly from small development studios, but also from mid-tier development studios and even studios that develop AAA games. The list of games that have been impacted by Sony's policies is too large to cover in this video, but we'll look at a few at the very least. Nora to Ojo to Noraneko Hato. For sure, the Switch version and the PlayStation Vita version that came out earlier have some pretty sexy scenes. But in the PS4 version, all of these scenes have been totally, how can we say, toned down with these nice sunbeams, which obscure just about everything happening in the scene. Yeah, there are a lot of sexy scenes in these games, but I'm pretty sure these are not being sought after by all the 6-year-olds out there. These are visual novels for which the target audience is probably adult males who are into this kind of stuff. And I mean, whatever, if you're letting your kid buy this stuff in the first place, that's your business, I guess. By the way, the Switch version of Nora got a CERO D 17+ rating, but the PlayStation version, I didn't look at a store around here, but I looked online and I could only find rating pending covers of the box for the game. So I don't know what it eventually got. Did it get a D, or did all the censorship actually push it down to a C, which is like 15+? I don't know. Saku Saku love blooms with the cherry blossoms. Some pretty big differences here, but no matter what you think, no matter how cringy you think this stuff is, if you're not into these types of games, why is the fun police coming in and stomping this into the dirt? It's just, there's really no reason for it when it already has the rating that suggests this is not for kids. Senran Kagura Burst. For this game, the intimacy mode, which has been a staple for the series, was essentially banned from the game by Sony in the PS4 version, Senran Kagura Burst Renewal. And of course, this would end up delaying the game and driving up the development costs. I personally think that the intimacy mode in these games is pretty cringy, but this is Senran Kagura. It's really over the top, super crazy kind of game that doesn't care about what people think about it. It just is. It's just ridiculous in every way. And it's already got an M rating, so why are you policing this? The youngest people who are playing this are, I don't know, some high school guys who think it's funny. And what about bashing someone's head in with a crowbar or a stick? Both of these games have an M rating, but I did not see you cracking down on Resident Evil 7. Devil May Cry 5. In this one, Trish's butt in a very short cutscene was censored. And I don't even know what to say about this. Is it funny that a company could be so sensitive to the human body, or is it just sad? It's a but. We've all seen them, we all have them. This game is rated M. What's the big deal here, ladies and gentlemen? Dead or Alive 3 Extreme Scarlet. So apparently a couple toys were removed from the PS4 version of the game. This included some kind of, I don't know, blowing device, which you could use to like blow the girls' skirts to try and look at their underwear. Pretty weird, I guess. And also some kind of jelly, which I'm not totally sure about this, but I think it was basically a jelly you could use to make the girls' like boobs more sensitive or something. It is kind of cringy and weird, but the people who are buying DOA Extreme probably have a very specific purpose for buying this game. And if you did buy this game for some reason without wanting to feel turned on by it or whatever, and you felt a little creeped out by these couple toys, you can think a little bit about, you know, if you think this is appropriate or not appropriate. But I don't think you need Sony to totally take that entire consideration away from you. But apparently they do in this current climate, which in my opinion is a little bit strange. Blade Arcus Rebellion. The box art on this game was adjusted so that you cannot see Pyron's navel or thighs because, oh my god, belly buttons. SNK 40th Anniversary Edition. First of all, congratulations SNK. That is a big anniversary. You guys are pretty cool. As you can see, compared to the Switch version of the game, in the PS4 version they have put Athena in a dress. I don't really care too much about this personally, but it is a little bit weird that they thought they needed to make this change. And yeah, that outfit is a bit ridiculous, but wait a second. Why did they not cover up these bare-chested studs? Seems like a bit of a double standard, doesn't it? And let's bear in mind that Athena was not like bare-breasted or anything. Yeah. She's wearing a bikini. So given the notion that apparently you are so concerned about the kids that you want to ban all of this supposedly lewd content, why are you leaving all these hunky shirtless dudes running around with their shirts off? Couldn't that also have a bad impact on kids' sound development, seeing all these sexy boys running around like that? And this is probably the most ridiculous thing I've noticed about their whole stance on the issue, and that is double standards. The double standard that a woman showing some skin is unacceptable, but a man being shirtless and muscular and sexualized and showing skin is apparently totally okay. And to be clear, I think both of these things are totally okay, but Sony, according to what they are censoring, does not. And the second part is the double standard of sexuality versus violence. As mentioned previously, we already have a rating system in place that suggests what age groups should be enjoying these games. But if I was trying to do some kind of virtuous signaling to the world, probably above these mildly erotic visual novels and so on, I might choose to focus on the hyper-violent, crazy games like Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil and so on, and target those for censorship on my platform. Resident Evil 7, The Evil Within, Call of Duty, Bloodborne, Wolfenstein, Mortal Kombat 11. You have all these extremely violent games which you are so ironically ignoring as you decide to censor basically not explicit content, but just content that features people in bikinis or people, you know, in a kind of sexualized situation. Of course, Sony has the right to decide what kind of content appears on their platform, but I really don't think that they are doing this in the right way. Furthermore, it really crushes these smaller developers, like the developers of Omega Labyrinth, who basically, you know, had their game completely banned from PS4. And a lot of these companies are relying on the fairly large amount of sales that they could generate from the PS4 user base. It's sad, it hurts developers. And it hurts you, Sony, because on top of that, any person who owns more than one platform, if they have a PS4 and a Switch and a PC or whatever, they look at these different versions of the games, which maybe they would have bought on the PS4 to begin with. But now they're like, oh my goodness, the content in this game has been toned down in a way that I don't feel good about. Of course, they're gonna buy this game on Switch or PC instead. You've effectively neutered sales of these games when it comes to multi-platform owners who are gonna take their money elsewhere. And while it may not matter for a game like Devil May Cry 5, where it's just like, you know, a little butt shot of Trish is censored, but when it comes to games like Noraneko Hato, for sure, people are gonna look at this and be like, oh, the PS4 game totally censored what I was hoping I could see in the game. There's no way I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to buy this on Nintendo Switch or PC or whatever. And when it comes to the next generation, PS5, they might take their dollars and go to PC or Nintendo. And here we arrive at Nintendo. And they are taking a totally different approach with regard to censorship of these games. An approach which anyone who appreciates freedom of expression in artistic works is really celebrating. So during their recent shareholders meetings, the kind of idea that other platform holders are suppressing different works and enforcing restrictions that are independent of the CERO readings came up, and the president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa, was asked about Nintendo's stance on the matter, and he had this to say: Nintendo, as do third parties and their software, applies for an objective rating from third-party organizations prior to release. If platform holding companies choose arbitrarily, the diversity and fairness in game software would be significantly inhibited. We provide parental controls that can be used to apply limits. And there you have it, a kind of indirect poo throw at Sony and some very big words that the diversity and fairness in game software would be inhibited by these kind of practices. That is what Nintendo believes, and that is why they are earning some big cred among gamers over the past week. Having a system set up that cherry picks which parts of games are acceptable or not acceptable, and which can be or cannot be expressed as the developer intended, as the fans wanted, that is not a cool thing. And especially when this kind of incredibly opaque review system does not give developers a clear guideline as to what they need to do to comply with Sony's policy, this starts to result in some really weird imbalances and also self-censorship to comply with guidelines that they're not even fully aware of, which restricts artistic vision. And if they end up not complying with these unclear guidelines anyways, then it ends up giving them a lot of extra expenses to deal with. Enforcing these kind of things in an industry that already has a rating system, much like the film industry does, is ridiculous. And let's not even forget that these consoles have parental controls built in, and kids who they are apparently worried about being exposed to this content have parents, which should do their job as parents and parent their kids. Once you start to give in to these kind of policies that restrict free expression, you start to lose ground, and this could very quickly turn into something where, you know, women in video games are not allowed to wear bikinis, or everybody has to wear like a kind of, I don't know, black uniform or something. It sounds crazy, but this is how really crazy things begin. And at this stage, it's just, you know, disappointing that different people who like this kind of stuff can't enjoy it on their favorite system, and not for any good reason as far as I can see. I know that Sony wants to protect their brand, and as a company they have every right to do so, but I just don't think this is the right way to go about it, and I think that in the long term they will lose customers if they continue to enforce these kind of policies. But anyways, good on Nintendo for sticking up for these games, and it is very interesting considering that in the past Nintendo has been very adamant about censoring different types of content in games, so very nice to see. Makes me very happy about owning a Nintendo Switch, and what a fucking dunk that was on Sony. Gamers seem to have responded very positively to this on the internet. Sony, I love you, but I did not expect you to take this kind of crazy policy that hurts these small developers in particular, and that also hurts the fans who want to enjoy the content on your platform, which they've enjoyed for decades, because you've always had a reputation for supporting these kind of visual novels and different content that now you are cracking down on. Very disappointing. What are you gonna do when the next Witcher game comes around? Are you gonna ban it on your system because it has nudity? Are you gonna ban the next Mass Effect or the next Elder Scrolls because there's nudity? I don't think you are. I think maybe there's some good intent behind this, but it is a little bit misguided. But I can tell you from what I've seen, the gamers do not like being policed, and I don't think they will appreciate this kind of content strategy. On the other hand, Nintendo, apparently they are all about the freedom, the unadulterated creativity, and even the nipples. But what do you think about the situation? Do you agree with Sony's stance? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts on it? Let me know in the comments, because I love chatting about these issues with all of you. Thank you so much for watching. Check out some of my other videos, and yeah, props to Nintendo. Ironically, the company with the most family-friendly image and the most to lose, who stuck up for the little guys and said, hey, we're not going to censor this stuff. We're going to rely on the rating systems that exist and let content come to our system that the fans want.